I'm Beatrice, 28 years old, and I'm standing in what used to be my sanctuary. Broken glass crunches under my feet, beer stains cover my grandmother's handmade quilts, and torn furniture fills every corner. 20 relatives just left after breaking in through my window while I was at work yesterday. My mother's text sits on my phone screen. Since you wouldn't answer, we made our own Christmas miracle. I dial 911 with steady hands. The dispatcher asks if I know who did this. Yes, I say coldly, my entire family. Before we dive into this incredible story of betrayal and justice, let me know where you're watching from today. If you've ever dealt with toxic family members who crossed every boundary imaginable, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I finally let the law handle what years of pleading couldn't fix. Trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless about how far some families will go, and how sweet justice can taste when you stop protecting people who never protected you. 2 years ago, my paternal grandmother passed away and left me her cabin in the mountains. It wasn't just property to me, it was where I spent every summer as a child, the only place I felt safe when my home life spiraled into chaos. Grandma Rose knew exactly what she was doing when she bypassed my parents and left it directly to me. The reading of the will turned into a war zone. My mother screamed that I must have manipulated a dying woman, while my father threatened to contest it in court. My Uncle Jimmy actually lunged across the lawyer's desk trying to grab the deed from my hands. The cabin wasn't their first attempt to take what was mine. Throughout my childhood and into my 20s, my family treated me like their personal ATM. When I was 16, I discovered my college fund had been drained for my father's failed business venture. He promised to pay it back but bought a boat instead. My mother took out credit cards in my name when I turned 18, maxing them out on shopping sprees and leaving me with destroyed credit that took years to rebuild. Every birthday and Christmas, they'd create some emergency that required my savings. My brother's sudden need for bail money, my sister's kid needing surgery that insurance mysteriously wouldn't cover, my uncle's house supposedly facing foreclosure. I worked 3 jobs through college, living on ramen and hope, while they posted vacation photos from cruises I unknowingly funded. Each time I tried to set boundaries, they'd unleash emotional warfare. My mother would sob about how selfish I was, how family helps family. My father would rage about ungrateful children who forgot where they came from. The extended family would pile on with phone calls and messages about how I was breaking my poor mother's heart. I believed them for too long, trapped in the cycle of guilt and manipulation. Last Christmas changed everything. I was hospitalized with appendicitis, scheduled for emergency surgery. While I lay in that hospital bed, scared and alone because none of them bothered to visit, they executed their cruelest betrayal yet. My mother convinced my bank she was my emergency contact and needed access to my accounts for medical bills. By the time I recovered, they'd emptied my checking and savings accounts, $23,000 I'd saved for a house down payment. Their excuse? They needed it more than I did, and besides, family shares everything. That was my breaking point. I hired a lawyer, filed police reports, and changed every lock and password in my life. The restraining orders came next, one against my parents for theft and harassment, another against Uncle Jimmy after he showed up at my workplace making threats. I moved to a new apartment, got a new phone number, and blocked every flying monkey they sent my way. For the first time in my life, I chose myself over their manufactured crises. The cabin became my healing space. I spent weekends there, slowly repairing not just the building but myself. I installed security cameras after catching my cousin Lisa trying to peek through windows. I changed the locks 3 times after finding evidence of attempted break-ins. My work in tech paid well, and I earned a promotion that let me work remotely. I made real friends who showed me what healthy relationships looked like. My therapist helped me understand that their behavior was abuse, not love. But they couldn't let go. The messages came through cousins, aunts, childhood friends they'd recruited. Each one carried the same poison wrapped in different paper. How could I abandon my family? Didn't I know my mother was sick with worry? How dare I keep what rightfully belonged to everyone? They painted me as the villain in every story, the cruel daughter hoarding wealth while her family suffered. I kept every message, every threat, building a file my lawyer said might come in handy someday. 2 weeks before this Christmas, the messages intensified. My Aunt Ruth called my office pretending to be a client to tell me I'd ruined Christmas for everyone. My cousin Mark sent Facebook messages saying the family was planning to take back what was theirs. My mother's sister leaked my new address to them, and I started finding strange cars parked outside. The security footage showed my father and uncle doing drive-bys, taking photos of my cabin. I upgraded the security system and warned the local sheriff's office about potential trouble. I never imagined they'd actually go through with it. December 24th started like any other workday at the tech company where I'd built my career. Being Jewish, I volunteered to work Christmas Eve so my colleagues could be with their families, never knowing my own was planning an assault on everything I'd worked to protect. At 2:30 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a security alert. Motion detected at the front door. I opened the app expecting to see maybe a delivery or wildlife, but my blood ran cold at the sight filling my screen. 20 members of my extended family stood on my property like an invading army. My parents led the pack, with Uncle Jimmy carrying a crowbar and my cousins hauling coolers and bags. They weren't even trying to hide their intentions. My mother stood at the front door, pounding and screaming loud enough for the cameras to pick up every word. "Open up, Beatrice. This is our family cabin and we're having Christmas here whether you like it or not." When no response came, she nodded to my father, who grabbed the crowbar from Jimmy. I watched in horror from my office desk as my father approached the large bay window I'd just had installed last summer. He didn't hesitate, swinging the crowbar like a baseball bat. The sound of shattering glass made me flinch even through the phone speaker. My coworkers gathered around as I called the police, but the dispatcher said the nearest unit was 45 minutes away due to holiday staffing. 45 minutes for my family to destroy everything I'd built. They poured through the broken window like looters, and that's exactly what they became. My mother went straight for my grandmother's antique china cabinet, wrapping pieces in newspapers she'd brought for the purpose. This wasn't spontaneous. They'd planned this theft down to bringing packing materials. Uncle Jimmy headed for my electronics, unplugging my new TV and sound system while his son helped carry them to their truck. My cousin Lisa made a beeline for my bedroom, and I watched her rifle through my jewelry box, trying on my grandmother's rings and necklaces. The security footage captured every detail of their rampage. My Aunt Ruth emptied my wine collection into boxes, including bottles I'd been saving for special occasions that cost more than she'd know. My brother, who I hadn't seen in 2 years, went through my home office, stuffing important documents into trash bags. He found my safe but couldn't open it, so he and my cousin tried to carry the whole thing out. When it proved too heavy, they took their frustration out on my bookshelves, sweeping hundreds of books onto the floor. My mother had brought her phone specifically to document their crime, though she saw it differently. She live-streamed on Facebook, narrating their invasion like a holiday special. Finally having Christmas in our family cabin, she announced to her audience. "My selfish daughter tried to keep us out, but family finds a way." The comments poured in from her enabling friends, cheering them on, completely unaware they were witnessing multiple felonies in real time. The younger cousins treated my home like their personal playground. Lisa's daughter, barely 16, went through my closet, trying on my clothes and posing for TikTok videos. "Check out my rich cousin's stuff," she captioned one, dancing in a dress I'd worn to a company gala. Her brother found my gaming setup and immediately started a live stream, inviting his followers to watch him play on equipment I'd saved months to afford. They acted like they'd won some sort of prize, completely oblivious to the consequences headed their way. The destruction escalated as alcohol entered the equation. They'd brought their own beer and liquor but also raided my collection. Uncle Jimmy found my late grandfather's aged whiskey, bottles I kept as memories more than drinks, and started passing them around. The more they drank, the meaner they became. My father discovered photo albums I'd made of happier times, before I understood what they really were. He held up pictures of my college graduation, the one none of them attended, and ripped them in half. "Think you're better than us?" he slurred at my image. The cruelest act came from Uncle Jimmy, who'd always resented that Grandma Rose loved me best. He found her portrait hanging in the living room, the one I'd had professionally restored. With several relatives cheering him on, he took it down, propped it against the wall, and unzipped his pants. The security camera captured him urinating on my grandmother's face while my family laughed and clapped. My mother filmed it, cackling about teaching the old woman a lesson for choosing favorites. Even typing this makes my hands shake with rage. They found my laptop in the office and, unable to access it, poured beer over the keyboard while chanting my name. Every act of destruction was personal, targeted at things they knew I valued. My cousin Mark discovered my filing cabinet with legal documents, including the restraining orders. He didn't just take them, he burned them in my fireplace, adding the copies of police reports and lawyer correspondence. "No more evidence," he shouted, not realizing cameras recorded his every crime. The neighbors noticed the commotion by evening. Mrs. Chen from next door tried to intervene, knowing I wasn't home. She knocked on the door, asking what was happening. My father answered, his face red with drink and rage. "Mind your own business, lady. This is family property and family business." When she insisted on calling me, Uncle Jimmy appeared behind my father, warning her to go home if she knew what was good for her. She retreated but called the sheriff's office, adding to my earlier report. By nightfall, they'd settled in for what they considered their rightful Christmas celebration. They cooked food in my kitchen, leaving grease and spills everywhere. They used my grandmother's handmade quilts as tablecloths, spilling wine and food on irreplaceable heirlooms. Someone vomited in the hallway and left it. They broke 2 dining room chairs using them as stepping stools to steal from high shelves. Every room showed evidence of their presence, from muddy boot prints on my cream carpet to handprints of food on the walls. The party continued past midnight, their destruction fueled by righteousness and alcohol. They took turns calling my phone, leaving voicemails that ranged from fake apologies to vicious threats. "Come home and face your family, coward," my father screamed into one message. "This is what happens when you think you're too good for blood." They posted dozens of photos across social media, tagging me in each one, wanting me to see what they'd done. The comments from their friends encouraged more damage, suggesting I deserved worse for abandoning family. They stayed overnight, sleeping in my bed, on my couches, wherever they passed out. The security footage from Christmas morning showed them slowly waking, some looking ashamed as sobriety brought clarity, others doubling down on their entitlement. They made breakfast using my food, leaving dishes piled in the sink and on counters. Before leaving, they loaded their vehicles with everything valuable they could carry. My mother took one last video, standing in my destroyed living room. "Merry Christmas, Beatrice. Maybe next year you'll remember what family means." They left around noon on December 26th, a convoy of criminals heading home with their stolen goods. The last to leave was Uncle Jimmy, who spray-painted "Family First" across my front door. They thought they'd won, proved their point, put me in my place. They had no idea that every second of their crime spree had been recorded in high definition from multiple angles, creating evidence so damning that even their most enabling relatives would have to face the truth. I arrived at my cabin with a full police escort just after 1 in the afternoon on December 26th. The sheriff himself had come after reviewing the security footage I'd sent from my phone. 3 patrol cars and a crime scene unit followed my vehicle up the winding mountain road. I thought I was prepared for what I'd see, having watched it happen live, but standing in my grandmother's sanctuary turned crime scene hit differently. Sheriff Martinez put his hand on my shoulder as I surveyed the devastation. "Take your time," he said. "We're going to document everything." The forensics team worked methodically through each room while I provided an inventory of what was stolen or destroyed. The broken bay window had let in the cold mountain air and some snow, adding water damage to their crimes. They'd taken approximately $30,000 in electronics, jewelry, and collectibles. The destruction totaled another $50,000, including custom furniture, the window, damaged flooring, and irreplaceable family heirlooms. Every surface bore evidence of their presence, from fingerprints in food and alcohol to DNA from various bodily fluids they'd left behind. Detective Sarah Coleman took my statement while her partner reviewed the security footage on my system. Her expression grew increasingly grim as I showed her the progression from breaking and entering to theft to vandalism to biological warfare. In 20 years on the force, she said, I've never seen family members document their own crimes so thoroughly. The Facebook videos, Instagram posts, and TikToks created a timeline that matched perfectly with my security cameras. They'd built an airtight case against themselves. The sheriff's department identified all 20 participants using the footage and social media posts. Each person's role was documented, from my parents as ringleaders to each cousin who stole specific items. The evidence logs grew to dozens of pages. My lawyer, recommended by my boss who was a former prosecutor, arrived within hours. Catherine Reeves was known for taking no prisoners in court, and her eyes lit up reviewing the evidence. They violated restraining orders while committing felonies, she said. This just became a federal case. The FBI field office expressed interest because several relatives had crossed state lines to commit these crimes. My cousin from Nevada, my aunt from Arizona, my uncle from Oregon, all had traveled specifically for this criminal gathering. Interstate conspiracy charges carried serious federal time. Agent David Park interviewed me about the family dynamics and previous threats. I provided my file of messages and documentation going back 2 years. He whistled low, reading through their escalating aggression. They really thought they'd get away with this? My boss, Steve Morrison, insisted I take paid leave to handle the situation. His support meant everything as I navigated the legal system. Word spread quickly through our small mountain community. Local news picked up the story after someone leaked the sheriff's report. Family Christmas invasion caught on camera became the headline that changed everything. Reporters called constantly, wanting interviews about how 20 family members could coordinate such an attack. I declined most requests on Catherine's advice, letting the evidence speak for itself. The restraining order violations transformed simple burglary charges into something far more serious. Each parent faced additional charges for violating protective orders. The prosecution added conspiracy charges for the planning evident in their messages. Theft charges were enhanced due to the value stolen. Vandalism became felony destruction of property. The biological attack on my grandmother's portrait added charges I didn't even know existed. In total, the district attorney filed over 60 felony charges across 20 defendants. I spent 3 nights in a hotel while a restoration company assessed the damage. My insurance company sent investigators after seeing the claim amount. They were shocked by the intentional family destruction but impressed by my documentation. Your security system just paid for itself 100 times over, the adjuster said. They fast-tracked my claim, cutting checks for immediate repairs while they pursued subrogation against my family's assets. I hired contractors to restore what could be saved and replace what couldn't. Moving back into the cabin required emotional strength I had to dig deep to find. Friends from work came to help, bringing food and muscle for cleaning. We created new memories to overlay the traumatic ones. My best friend, Amy, spent the first night with me, making sure I felt safe. The new security system included panic buttons and direct lines to the sheriff's office. I changed every lock again and installed reinforced windows. The cabin became a fortress, but I refused to let their violation make it a prison. The investigation revealed more than just the Christmas crimes. Financial forensics showed patterns of fraud among several family members. Uncle Jimmy had been running insurance scams. My mother had multiple identities for benefit fraud. My father owed back taxes that made my eyes water. Their house of cards was collapsing, and they blamed me for the wind. Catherine explained that asset forfeiture could help pay restitution. They wanted your cabin, she said. They might lose their own homes instead. Discovery of their group texts proved premeditation beyond any doubt. For weeks, they'd discussed their plan in a chat named Taking Back Christmas. They debated bringing weapons, assigned roles for who would take what, and discussed how to make me sell the cabin afterward. My mother wrote that I needed to be put in my place once and for all. My father suggested they could force a conservatorship claiming I was mentally unstable. Uncle Jimmy wanted to burn the cabin if they couldn't take it. These messages turned their drunk destruction into calculated conspiracy. My extended family's reactions split into camps. Some relatives who hadn't participated were horrified by the footage. My mother's brother called from Florida, apologizing for not believing me earlier about their behavior. Several cousins reached out, sharing their own stories of abuse from the same people. Others doubled down, insisting family should protect family no matter what. These enablers found themselves under investigation for possible accessory charges based on their social media encouragement during the crimes. The media attention intensified as more details emerged. A true crime podcast contacted me about doing an episode. Local news ran nightly updates as arrests were made. The security footage clips that were released publicly went viral, particularly Uncle Jimmy's assault on my grandmother's portrait. Public opinion turned harshly against my family. Their social media accounts filled with outrage from strangers. They'd wanted attention and got it, just not the kind they expected. Business owners in town began refusing service to my family members. The grocery store manager asked my mother to leave after she harassed his cashier about me. My father got fired from his job when his employer saw the news coverage. Uncle Jimmy's contractor license came under review. The consequences rippled through their lives like the destruction they'd brought to mine. They'd thought they were teaching me a lesson about family loyalty. Instead, they learned about accountability. Catherine prepared me for the long legal battle ahead. They'll try every manipulation tactic, she warned. Tears, threats, flying monkeys, media manipulation. Stay strong and let the evidence talk. She was right about everything. The call started immediately, relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly concerned about family unity. Each conversation followed a script, someone clearly coaching them. I changed my number again and filtered everything through Catherine. The system I'd once feared would protect them was now my shield against their lifetime of abuse. Within 48 hours of the arrests, my family launched their counteroffensive with the coordination of a military campaign. My mother, out on bail, called a family meeting at her house where they crafted their victim narrative. Security footage from a cousin who attended but later flipped showed them practicing their stories, assigning roles for media appearances, and creating fake evidence to support their claims. They underestimated how many relatives were sick of their behavior and willing to provide information to prosecutors. The social media campaign began with my mother's tearful video posted across every platform. Sitting in her kitchen, the same place she'd planned my destruction, she sobbed about her cruel daughter who stole her mother's cabin through elder abuse. She claimed Grandma Rose had dementia, that I'd isolated her and forced her to change the will. The comments poured in from her church friends and enablers, calling me heartless, suggesting I needed prayer or worse. She conveniently forgot to mention the breaking and entering, the theft, or the destruction. My father took a different approach, presenting himself as the heartbroken patriarch just trying to bring his family together for Christmas. He gave interviews to anyone who'd listen, describing how I'd changed after getting fancy city jobs and thought I was better than my roots. He painted a picture of a humble working-class family excluded by their elitist daughter. Local talk radio ate it up until producers actually watched the security footage. His scheduled appearances suddenly got cancelled when they realized they'd been platforming a burglar. The relatives posted carefully edited videos that excluded their crimes. Lisa shared clips of her dancing in my clothes but cut out the theft part. Mark posted about the family reunion without showing him burning legal documents. They created a hashtag #JusticeForFamily, that briefly trended in our area. But internet detectives quickly found the full videos, the security footage leaks, and started sharing the truth. Their hashtag became a mockery as people posted memes about criminals wanting justice for being caught. The GoFundMe page my mother created claimed they needed money for legal fees after being falsely accused by vindictive daughter. She wrote a novel-length description of my supposed cruelty, dating back to childhood. According to her fiction, I'd always been selfish, hoarding toys and money while my siblings suffered. She claimed the cabin was promised to the whole family, that I'd stolen their heritage. The fundraiser included photos of family gatherings at the cabin from years ago, trying to establish their claim. They raised $5,000 before GoFundMe investigated and froze the funds. My workplace became their next target. They found our company directory online and started calling every department. HR received dozens of calls claiming I was mentally unstable, a thief, an abuser. My mother called pretending to be a concerned client, saying she'd heard terrible things about my character. My father emailed the CEO directly, attaching their edited videos and demanding my termination. Uncle Jimmy showed up at the office parking lot, approaching employees to spread lies about me. Security footage caught him keying cars he thought were mine. The revelation of their true plan came from an unexpected source. My Aunt Helen, my father's sister who lived across the country, had been horrified by the news coverage. She'd received a call from him before the break-in, bragging about their plan to force me to sell the cabin. She'd recorded it after years of watching him bully family members. In the call, he detailed how they'd make the cabin unlivable, destroy my reputation, and offer to buy it for cheap when I was desperate. He even mentioned having a buyer lined up who'd pay them triple what they'd offer me. Catherine added witness tampering to their charges when we discovered they'd been contacting everyone involved. My neighbors received threatening calls about their testimony. Mrs. Chen found her garden vandalized after speaking to police. The contractor fixing my cabin got messages suggesting accidents might happen on the job site. Each threat was recorded and reported, adding to their legal troubles. They couldn't help themselves, compounding their crimes daily in their desperation to escape consequences. The false abuse allegations reached new lows when they involved Child Protective Services. My cousin Diana, who I'd never even met, called CPS claiming I was abusing her children during visits. The investigation found she lived 3 states away and her kids didn't know I existed. Adult Protective Services received reports that I was elder abusing my mother, despite her being healthy and 10 years younger than claimed. Each false report was a crime, but they kept filing them, hoping something would stick. Local news initially gave them platform time, always seeking both sides of a story. But journalists started fact-checking their claims. The supposed dementia diagnosis for Grandma Rose didn't exist. The family cabin meetings they described never happened according to other relatives. Their poverty claims fell apart when reporters found their social media full of vacations and luxury purchases. One investigative piece exposed how they'd stolen from other family members too, creating a pattern going back decades. My mother's tears turned to rage when their narrative collapsed. She posted increasingly unhinged videos, sometimes drunk, ranting about ungrateful children and the collapse of family values. She doxed my address, encouraged harassment, and suggested people should visit me to share their opinions. The FBI added cyberstalking charges to her growing list. Her church finally had enough, asking her to leave after she disrupted services with rants about me. Even her most dedicated enablers started distancing themselves. The hired lawyer turned out to be exactly what you'd expect for someone taking a case this bad. Marcus Brennan had been disciplined by the bar twice for ethical violations. His strategy seemed to be throwing everything at the wall, filing motion after motion that judges rejected. He held press conferences on the courthouse steps, making wild accusations about conspiracies and setups. His claims grew more outlandish, suggesting I'd drugged my family to make them commit crimes. The judge warned him about contempt multiple times. When their legal strategies failed, they turned to emotional manipulation through third parties. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly called with emergencies. My high school friends received messages about intervention needs. They created fake social media profiles to contact my friends, sharing their version of events. A cousin I'd been close to in childhood was promised money to reconcile with me and gather information. She came clean immediately, providing screenshots of their offers. Every scheme pushed more people to my side. The revelation that shook even me came from forensic accounting during asset discovery. My family hadn't just stolen from me over the years. They'd targeted elderly relatives, vulnerable family members, anyone with resources. Grandma Rosa's missing jewelry hadn't been lost, my mother sold it. The uncle whose house supposedly faced foreclosure had actually been scammed by my father in a fake investment scheme. Pattern after pattern emerged of financial elder abuse, fraud, and theft spanning decades. I wasn't special, I was just their most recent target who finally fought back. As their world crumbled, they lashed out with increasing desperation. Uncle Jimmy was arrested again for violating bail conditions after driving by my cabin. My mother got caught shoplifting, claiming stress made her forget to pay. My father started drinking heavily, getting into bar fights while ranting about ungrateful daughters. Each family member spiraled in their own way, blaming me for consequences they'd earned. They'd spent so long avoiding accountability that facing it broke their sense of reality. The pre-trial hearings began in early March, and the courthouse became a circus of family drama played out in public. 67 felony charges across 20 defendants meant scheduling nightmares, but the prosecution pushed for joint proceedings where possible. The evidence was so overwhelming that several defense attorneys immediately advised plea deals. But my family, convinced of their righteousness and that blood trumped law, insisted on their innocence. They believed a jury of real people would understand why family deserved access to family property. During discovery, the full scope of their premeditation became clear. The prosecution presented a timeline going back 6 months, showing how they'd researched the cabin's value, contacted real estate agents about quick sales, and even got estimates from contractors about subdividing the property. Text messages showed them discussing my work schedule, planning the break-in for when I'd be gone longest. They'd assigned specific items for each person to steal, creating shopping lists of my belongings. The conspiracy was so detailed they'd even planned which pawn shops to use for selling my electronics. The forensic evidence was devastating. DNA from Uncle Jimmy's public urination on Grandma Rosa's portrait. Fingerprints on stolen items recovered from their homes. Digital forensics showing they'd tried to access my bank accounts from my stolen laptop. The security footage was enhanced and authenticated, showing clear identification of each participant. Their own social media posts were entered as evidence, each tagged photo and gleeful video adding to their guilt. The defense had nothing to counter with except tears and claims of family bonds. Witness testimony began with law enforcement describing the scene they'd found. Sheriff Martinez, a 30-year veteran, testified he'd never seen such deliberate family destruction. The forensics team detailed each piece of evidence, creating a timeline that matched perfectly with my security footage. My neighbors testified about the threats they'd received, with Mrs. Chen breaking down describing how terrified she'd been. The contractor who'd fixed my cabin testified about finding hidden damage, suggesting they'd tried to compromise the building's structure. When I took the stand, Catherine had prepared me for the emotional manipulation I'd face. Sure enough, my mother sobbed loudly through my entire testimony, occasionally wailing about her baby girl. My father glared with such hatred that the bailiff positioned himself between us. I detailed years of financial abuse, showing bank records of their thefts, credit reports showing their fraud, medical records from when I was hospitalized, and they emptied my accounts. I explained how the cabin was my only safe space, the one thing they couldn't take, until they literally broke in and took everything else. The cross-examination by their bargain-rate lawyer was a disaster for the defense. He tried to paint me as a cold daughter who abandoned family, but Catherine had prepared me well. I calmly recounted each time I'd tried to help, each boundary I'd set that they'd violated, each chance I'd given before finally protecting myself with restraining orders. When he suggested I was wealthy and should share with family, I produced records showing how they'd already stolen hundreds of thousands over my lifetime. His attempts to invoke family obligation fell flat when I asked why that obligation only went one direction. The turning point came when several family members flipped to testify for the prosecution. My cousin Stephanie, who'd been at the break-in but left early, testified about the planning meetings and how she'd been promised my jewelry if she participated. My aunt from Florida flew in to testify about my father's history of targeting family members for financial scams. Even my brother's ex-wife testified about witnessing previous thefts and the family's entitlement to my belongings. Each testimony painted a picture of serial criminals who happened to share my DNA. The defense's case was a train wreck of conflicting stories and obvious lies. My mother testified that I'd invited them for Christmas, then called police as a prank. The security footage of her screaming threats while my father broke the window played immediately after. My father claimed the cabin belonged to the whole family, but couldn't explain why the deed was in my name alone. Uncle Jimmy insisted he'd been drunk and didn't remember anything, until the prosecution showed him directing others on exactly what to steal. Each defendant contradicted the others, their stories falling apart under basic questioning. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, returning guilty verdicts on all counts for all defendants. As the foreman read verdict after verdict, my family's disbelief turned to panic. My mother fainted dramatically, requiring medical attention that the court nurse deemed performative. My father lunged toward me, screaming about family betrayal before being tackled by bailiffs. That earned him additional charges for attempted assault in court. Uncle Jimmy just sat stone-faced, finally understanding that consequences existed even for family. Sentencing brought more drama as each defendant begged for mercy. My parents, as ringleaders with prior convictions for fraud, received 10 years each. Uncle Jimmy got 8 years for the biological attack and conspiracy charges. The cousins received 2 to 5 years depending on their level of participation and criminal history. The judge ordered full restitution plus punitive damages totaling $300,000. When my mother screamed about the unfairness, the judge reminded her she'd documented her own crimes and shown no remorse. Asset forfeiture began immediately to pay restitution. My parents' house, the one they'd bought with money stolen from various relatives, was seized and sold. Uncle Jimmy's trucks and tools went to auction. Cousins lost cars and electronics. The GoFundMe money was redirected to me as partial restitution. Retirement accounts were garnished. The family who'd acted like they owned everything suddenly owned nothing. Several relatives who'd enabled them found themselves paying damages for their encouraging comments during the crime. Professional consequences followed the legal ones. My father's contractor license was permanently revoked. My mother was banned from her volunteer positions. Uncle Jimmy lost his CDL and could never drive commercially again. Cousins lost nursing licenses, teaching credentials, and security clearances. Background checks would forever show their felony convictions. The family name became toxic in our community. Some had to move to find work, only to have their crimes follow them through internet searches. The extended family fractures became permanent. Those who'd testified against them faced retaliation from the enablers. Family gatherings split into camps, those who supported justice and those who clung to toxic loyalty. Grandma Rose's other children finally spoke up about years of abuse from my parents. Stories emerged of thefts, frauds, and manipulations going back generations. The trial had exposed not just one crime but a family culture of entitlement and abuse that had festered in silence. Appeals were filed and quickly rejected. The evidence was too overwhelming, the procedures followed correctly. Their lawyer was eventually disbarred for other ethical violations, leaving them with public defenders who advised accepting their sentences. Prison communications were monitored after they tried organizing harassment campaigns from inside. Each attempt to manipulate the system added time to their sentences. They'd spent their lives believing consequences were for other people. Prison taught them otherwise. The financial forensics revealed one final surprise. My family had been living far beyond their means for years, funded by various frauds and thefts. Without their criminal income and with assets seized, those not imprisoned faced bankruptcy. Extended family members who'd loaned them money discovered it was gone forever. Business partners found themselves creditors in bankruptcy proceedings. The house of cards didn't just fall, it buried everyone who'd built their lives on the family's crimes. Justice had done what I never could, shown everyone exactly who they really were. The trial itself became our small town's event of the year, with lines forming outside the courthouse each morning as locals vied for seats in the gallery. Media from neighboring states arrived to cover what they dubbed the Christmas conspiracy case. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michelle Rodriguez, had requested cameras in the courtroom, knowing the visual evidence would speak louder than any argument. My family, still convinced they were the victims, welcomed the attention, not understanding they were about to be exposed on a public stage they'd never leave. Opening statements set the tone for what would become a 3-week spectacle of entitled criminality meeting immovable justice. Rodriguez methodically laid out how 20 adults had conspired to terrorize one woman for inheriting what was legally hers. She played snippets of security footage on the courtroom's large screen, each image causing gasps from the gallery. The defense's opening was a rambling appeal to emotion, with Brennan actually arguing that family love should supersede property law. Judge Harrison's expression suggested he was already regretting not retiring last year. The prosecution's case unfolded like a masterclass in criminal justice. Each witness built upon the last, creating an unshakable foundation of guilt. The IT specialist who'd authenticated the digital evidence explained how the timestamps proved coordination across multiple devices and locations. The financial crimes investigator detailed the paper trail of their conspiracy, showing bank searches for my accounts and credit applications in my name. The property assessor testified about inquiries from my family about subdividing land they didn't own. Every piece of evidence had been preserved perfectly, thanks to my obsessive documentation. When the security footage played in full, several jurors visibly recoiled. The transformation from break-in to ransacking to vindictive destruction played out in high definition. Uncle Jimmy's biological attack on Grandma Rose's portrait caused one juror to cry. The gallery murmured with disgust as my family members high-fived each other while destroying my belongings. Their own social media posts followed, showing them bragging about their crimes in real time. My mother's Facebook Live tour of her reclaimed family cabin while wine-drunk became the prosecution's most powerful evidence. The family members who'd flipped provided devastating testimony about the planning process. Cousin Michael, granted immunity for his cooperation, described mandatory family meetings where they'd rehearsed their roles. He produced his own recordings of Uncle Jimmy explaining how to disable security systems and my father researching squatters' rights. The conspiracy went deeper than even I'd known, with evidence they'd tried recruiting extended family from across the country, promising shares of the cabin's sale price. Most had refused and were now witnesses for the prosecution. My testimony stretched across 2 days as I detailed not just the Christmas break-in but decades of escalating abuse. Catherine had advised me to be thorough, and I was. Bank records showed $150,000 stolen over 15 years through various schemes. Medical records documented stress-related hospitalizations that coincided with their worst thefts. Photos showed the cabin's transformation from Grandma Rose's neglected property to my restored sanctuary, every improvement paid for with money I'd saved despite their constant theft attempts. The judge allowed it all, recognizing the pattern of criminal behavior. The cross-examination turned into Brennan's professional suicide. He tried to shame me for abandoning family, but I calmly listed each crime they'd committed against me. He suggested I could afford the losses, so I produced my student loan statements and evidence of the 3 jobs I'd worked to survive their thefts. When he implied I'd manipulated my grandmother, I played audio recordings of her explaining why she'd left me the cabin, describing my parents' attempts to steal from her. His final desperate attempt to invoke sympathy by mentioning my mother's tears was met with my simple question: where were her tears when she was destroying my grandmother's photographs? The defense's case lasted only 2 days and consisted mainly of my family members committing perjury. My mother took the stand in a performance worthy of community theater, complete with clutching her chest and calling for water. She claimed I'd been mentally ill since childhood, that the break-in was an intervention. When Rodriguez showed her the Facebook posts calling it a "Taking Back What's Ours" party, she insisted her account was hacked. The jury forewoman actually rolled her eyes. My father's testimony was angry rambling about disrespectful children and changing society. He admitted to breaking the window but claimed he owned the cabin spiritually. Uncle Jimmy's testimony became the trial's most memorable disaster. Still maintaining his drunken amnesia defense, he was shown the footage of him giving detailed instructions to cousins about which items to steal. His claim that he didn't remember was shattered when Rodriguez produced his bar tab from that night, showing he'd only had 2 beers before the break-in. When confronted with the portrait incident, he actually tried to claim it was performance art protesting favoritism. The judge had to call a recess when gallery members couldn't stop laughing. Each family member who testified dug their holes deeper. Cousin Lisa claimed she was just trying on clothes for fun, not stealing, despite footage of her loading bags into her car. Mark insisted burning legal documents was a spiritual cleansing ritual. Their stories contradicted each other so badly that Rodriguez created a chart showing 20 different versions of the same events. The defense attorney objected to the chart as prejudicial, but the judge noted the defendants had created the contradictions themselves. By the end, even Brennan looked defeated. The jury returned guilty verdicts on all 67 counts in near-record time. As each verdict was read, the reality finally penetrated my family's delusion. My mother's theatrical fainting turned real when she heard guilty of felony conspiracy. My father's rage evaporated into shocked silence at guilty of violating a protective order. Uncle Jimmy just nodded, perhaps relieved the charade was over. The cousins who'd treated it all as a joke suddenly understood they were now felons. The courtroom erupted as family members not charged screamed about injustice until the judge threatened contempt charges. Victim impact statements before sentencing allowed others they'd hurt to speak. Elderly relatives described thefts disguised as borrowing. Former family friends detailed loan scams and emotional manipulation. Mrs. Chen tearfully explained how their threats had made her afraid in her own home. I saved my statement for last, reading a letter to Grandma Rose about how I'd protected her gift and found justice she never got. I ended by announcing that restitution money would fund scholarships for students escaping abusive families. Even the court reporter was crying. Sentencing day brought maximum penalties across the board. The judge cited their complete lack of remorse and continued criminal behavior during trial. My parents each received 10 years with no early release recommendation. Uncle Jimmy got 8 years plus mandatory anger management. Cousins received 2 to 5 years based on their roles and records. Fines and restitution totaled over $500,000. The judge ordered no contact for life, warning that any violation would result in immediate imprisonment. He called it the worst case of family criminality he'd seen in 40 years on the bench. The aftermath rippled through their lives like an earthquake. Those still free faced civil lawsuits from other victims emboldened by the guilty verdicts. 3 divorces were filed within a month as spouses discovered the extent of the crimes. Children of the convicted faced bullying at school about their jailbird parents, jobs were lost, homes foreclosed, and reputations destroyed. The family name became synonymous with entitled criminality in our region. Local news ran annual updates on the Christmas conspiracy family, ensuring their shame stayed fresh. Prison communications revealed they still blamed me rather than accepting responsibility. Letters sent through other inmates were intercepted, showing plans for revenge after release. These resulted in extended sentences and transfers to higher security facilities. Some family members found prison gangs unwelcoming to those who'd victimized their own blood. My father was beaten badly enough to require hospitalization after bragging about what he'd do to me when released. Uncle Jimmy found himself the target of pranks referencing his portrait incident. Prison justice had its own way of handling family abusers. The extended family transformation was remarkable. Relatives who'd enabled them for years finally acknowledged the truth. Support groups formed for those recovering from my family's various scams. Younger cousins reached out, sharing how the trial had opened their eyes to generational abuse patterns. Some sought therapy, others cut contact with the imprisoned members. Family reunions were formed without the toxic core, becoming actual celebrations instead of manipulation conventions. The crime that was meant to force family unity had instead revealed who truly deserved the title of family. The cabin restoration began as more than just repairing physical damage, it became my healing journey made tangible. I hired local craftsmen, many who'd known Grandma Rose, and they approached the work with reverence. The shattered bay window was replaced with reinforced glass that caught mountain sunlight even better than before. Where my family had torn and stained her handmade quilts, textile artists carefully restored what could be saved and recreated what couldn't. Each repair felt like reclaiming not just property but my right to exist without their shadow. Insurance money and restitution funds transformed tragedy into opportunity. The security system upgraded to state-of-the-art technology with AI-powered threat detection and direct police connection. But more meaningfully, I added touches Grandma Rose would have loved. A library nook where they'd destroyed my books, filled with first editions of her favorite mysteries. A meditation room where Uncle Jimmy had his meltdown, painted in the soft lavender she'd always worn. The kitchen where they'd trashed everything became a chef's dream, perfect for hosting the chosen family gatherings I'd never imagined possible. The YouTube channel started accidentally when a friend suggested I share my story to help others. From Victim to Victory launched with a simple video of me standing in my restored cabin, explaining how I'd survived family abuse and found justice. Within days, thousands of comments poured in from people who'd lived similar nightmares but never fought back. The subscriber count exploded as I shared practical advice about documenting abuse, working with law enforcement, and healing from family trauma. What began as catharsis became a mission to show others they weren't alone and justice was possible. My content evolved from personal story to comprehensive resource. I interviewed lawyers about restraining orders, therapists about trauma recovery, and financial advisors about protecting assets from family theft. The channel's most popular series, Red Flags You're Not Crazy to Notice, helped thousands recognize abuse patterns they'd been gaslit into accepting. Comment sections became support groups where survivors shared their own stories. Monetization felt wrong initially, but viewers insisted, and I donated half to domestic violence organizations while using the rest to help subscribers in crisis. The channel's success led to unexpected opportunities. Publishers wanted my full story, documentary producers called, and speaking requests flooded in. But the most meaningful invitation came from the district attorney's office, asking me to speak at their training conference about prosecuting family crimes. Law enforcement often struggled with family matter dismissals, and my case provided a template for taking these crimes seriously. I stood before a room of prosecutors and detectives, showing them how documentation and persistence could break through family protection myths. Through volunteer work at domestic violence shelters, I met David, a social worker who understood trauma because he'd survived his own. Our first conversation lasted 6 hours, comparing scars and marveling at our survival. He didn't flinch when I explained my family situation or the ongoing security needs. Instead, he shared his own journey escaping an abusive family who'd tried to destroy him for being gay. We bonded over gallows humor about toxic relatives and the freedom of chosen family. Love grew slowly, built on mutual respect and shared understanding. The extended family reconnections surprised me most. Cousins I'd barely known reached out after watching the trial coverage, sharing how my parents had isolated me through lies about my character. My mother's youngest sister, who'd lived overseas during everything, flew in to apologize for not protecting me as a child. She'd suspected abuse but been too afraid to act. Now she volunteered with my channel, sharing an enabler's perspective and urging others to speak up before it was too late. Not all blood family was poison. Some had just been scared into silence. One cousin, Emma, who'd been forced to participate at 16, reached out from college with a genuine apology. She'd been terrified of her parents, but watching them go to prison freed her to seek therapy and break the cycle. We began corresponding carefully, with clear boundaries. She volunteered at youth shelters and spoke about growing up in a criminal family. When she graduated, I attended, seeing hope in the next generation refusing to continue toxic patterns. Her genuine accountability and change showed that DNA didn't determine destiny. 3 years later, my life looked nothing like the isolated existence they'd forced on me through fear. The cabin hosted monthly gatherings for my support group, survivors finding strength in shared meals and honest conversation. David and I had married in a small ceremony surrounded by the family we'd chosen, people who'd proven their love through actions, not demanded it through blood. My YouTube channel had grown to 300,000 subscribers, with merchandise sales funding legal aid for abuse survivors. The community they'd tried to turn against me had become my strongest supporters. The irony wasn't lost on me that their crimes had created everything they'd tried to prevent. Their break-in funded improvements that made the cabin worth triple what they'd hoped to steal. Their trial brought me a platform to help thousands escape similar abuse. Their attempts to destroy my reputation had instead revealed their own monstrosity while showing my strength. Even their imprisonment had given me peace I'd never known, freedom from constant vigilance against the next attack. They'd handed me the tools for my own liberation. Prison updates came through official channels, painting a picture of continued delusion. My mother had become the inmate no one wanted to cell with, her constant victim narratives exhausting even hardened criminals. My father's rage had aged him rapidly, his health declining as he refused prison programs that required accountability. Uncle Jimmy had found religion, though his letters seeking forgiveness through various ministries went unanswered. Some cousins had genuinely reformed, taking education programs and therapy, while others just counted days until they could resume their grievances. But their choices no longer affected my life. The cabin's security system collected dust because no one threatened my peace. Bank accounts grew without mysterious withdrawals. Holidays brought joy instead of dread. I could answer my door without fear, shop without checking for familiar cars, and exist without constant hypervigilance. The freedom felt surreal even years later. Sometimes I'd stand in my kitchen, making coffee in peaceful silence, and marvel that this simple moment was my victory. The scholarship fund I'd established had helped 15 students escape abusive families for college. Their letters describing new lives made every legal battle worthwhile. Young people who'd been told they were selfish for wanting safety now thrived in dorms and classrooms. Some went into law enforcement or social work, determined to help others escape. One recipient, whose family had similarly tried to steal her inheritance, became a prosecutor specializing in family financial abuse. The ripples of justice spread far beyond my own story. My final video of the year always aired on Christmas Eve, the anniversary of their crime. This year, I stood in my cabin's main room, decorated with ornaments from viewers and survivors I'd helped. The tree topper was a star made from pieces of the shattered bay window, transformed from weapon to art. David filmed as I addressed the camera one last time before our friends arrived for dinner. The chosen family who'd replaced blood with genuine love. 4 years ago, 20 relatives broke into this cabin to steal what they thought belonged to them. They shattered windows and destroyed belongings, thinking that would break me too. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the strength to let toxic people face the consequences of their actions. Every broken window can be replaced with something stronger. Every stolen item was just a thing, but the peace I've found is priceless. My cabin is no longer just walls and memories. It's proof that we can rebuild after devastation, that justice can prevail over entitlement, and that chosen family is often stronger than blood. The system I once feared would protect them became my greatest ally in breaking generational cycles of abuse. And this Christmas, surrounded by people who truly love me, who've proven it through respect and genuine care, I finally understand what family really means. To those still trapped in toxic family situations, wondering if you're crazy for wanting to escape, you're not. Document everything, seek help, and remember, their anger at your boundaries is not your responsibility to manage. You deserve peace. You deserve safety. You deserve a family that treats you with the love and respect you show them. Merry Christmas to my chosen family, and to all of you who've become part of this healing journey. The camera faded to black as our friends arrived, their laughter filling the cabin with warmth my blood family had never provided. Through the restored bay window, snow began falling on the mountains, blanketing the past in pristine white. Inside, surrounded by love that was earned rather than demanded, I finally understood why Grandma Rose had left me this cabin. Not just as property, but as the foundation for building a life free from those who claimed love while practicing destruction. Her gift had saved me, and through sharing my story, it had helped save so many others. The system that had failed so many abuse victims had worked because I'd made it impossible to ignore. But more than legal victory, I'd won the right to define my own family, to choose love over blood, respect over manipulation, and peace over the chaos they'd called connection. The cabin stood strong against winter storms, just as I'd learned to stand against those who'd tried to break me. And in that strength, shared with thousands of survivors finding their own voices, Grandma Rose's true legacy lived on. Not in walls and windows, but in the courage to say enough, to demand justice, and to build something beautiful from the ashes of what toxic family had tried to burn down. Looking back, would I change anything? Not a single moment. Every document saved, every boundary held, every legal battle fought had led to this freedom. They'd given me the greatest gift through their crimes, undeniable proof that I'd been right to escape, and the tools to help others do the same. The family that broke into my cabin that Christmas had created their own downfall and my ultimate victory. Sometimes the best revenge truly is a life well lived, surrounded by genuine love, helping others escape the darkness you once knew. And as my chosen family raised their glasses in a toast to survived storms and brighter tomorrows, I knew Grandma Rose was smiling, wherever she was, knowing her cabin had become exactly what she'd intended. A refuge for healing, a symbol of strength, and a home for the family we choose. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to stand up to toxic family members who felt entitled to what was yours? Share your own stories of survival and boundaries in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content about surviving family abuse and finding justice. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone in dealing with toxic family dynamics. Your support helps this channel reach more survivors who need to know that healing and justice are possible. Thank you for being part of this journey, and remember, you deserve a family that respects your boundaries and celebrates your success, not one that sees you as property to exploit. Merry Christmas to all of you who've chosen healing over hatred, and may your new year be filled with the peace that comes from standing in your truth.